The city was a labyrinth of secrets. Towers of glass and steel scraped the sky. They arrived with the setting sun, each drawn to the city's allure. A grand hotel, its facade gleaming with promises of luxury and escape, beckoned them. The air hung thick with humidity, the lingering heat of the day refusing to yield. Inside the grand hotel lobby, cool air offered a welcome respite. The next morning, the city roared back to life. Inside the Grand Hotel, a different kind of rhythm unfolded. John, fueled by caffeine and ambition, was already on his third phone call. Maya, bathed in the soft glow of the morning light, was lost in her own world. The Thompson family, their faces alight with anticipation, huddled over a map spread out on their table. As the morning wore on, their paths began to intersect, drawn together by the invisible threads of fate or chance. John, his phone call finally over, noticed Maya sketching at her table. The Grand Hotel, for all its opulence and grandeur, held secrets within its walls, whispers of forgotten stories, echoes of lives lived and lost. The blackout hit without warning. One moment the city was ablaze with light, the next, it was plunged into darkness. The city, once a symphony of sound, was draped in an unnerving silence. Inside the Grand Hotel, the initial shock gave way to a tense, uncertain calm. Time, no longer measured by the steady ticking of clocks or the digital glow of phones, seemed to warp and distort. The emergency generator sputtered to life, bathing the lobby in a dim, flickering light. As the minutes ticked by, the initial chaos in the lobby gradually subsided, replaced by a tense, expectant hush. People huddled in small groups, their whispers barely audible above the low hum of the emergency generator. The scream, high-pitched and filled with raw terror, seemed to hang in the air, echoing off the marble floors and vaulted ceilings. For a moment, everyone froze, their eyes wide with fear, their bodies tense with anticipation. The disappearance of the shadowy figure was only the beginning. As the minutes stretched into what felt like an eternity, other guests began to vanish. The Grand Hotel, once a sanctuary of luxury, had become a labyrinth of shadows and fear. The initial panic, sparked by the sudden blackout, had subsided, replaced by a chilling quietude punctuated by the frantic echoes of those left behind. John, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, called out for Maya, his voice swallowed by the oppressive darkness. He stumbled through the lobby, his hands outstretched, brushing against unseen obstacles, his fear growing with each passing moment. He could hear Mrs. Thompson's voice, shrill and desperate, calling for her son, Ethan. Her cries echoed through the vast emptiness of the hotel, a stark reminder of the invisible horror that had gripped them all. John pressed on, his mind reeling, struggling to make sense of the impossible. People were gone, vanished without a trace, swallowed by the darkness as if they had never been there at all. He could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon him, hear the whisper of movement in the shadows just beyond his reach. The darkness itself seemed to pulsate with a malevolent energy, a sentient force that toyed with him, herded him deeper into its terrifying embrace. He had to find Maya, had to know she was safe, but the more he searched, the more he felt a chilling certainty that safety was an illusion, a luxury that no longer existed within the walls of the Grand Hotel. Lena moved through the darkness with a grace that bordered on the unnatural. While others stumbled and cried out, their fear a beacon in the oppressive silence, she seemed to glide effortlessly, her footsteps silent, her presence barely perceptible. The darkness, it seemed, did not hinder her, but rather welcomed her, embraced her as one of its own. She paused at the foot of the grand staircase, her head cocked slightly to one side, as if listening to a conversation only she could hear. The air around her crackled with an unseen energy, a subtle vibration that spoke of things unseen, of forces beyond human comprehension. She could sense the fear that permeated the very walls of the hotel, tasted on her tongue like bitter ash. It was a heady brew, intoxicating in its intensity, and she drank it in, savoring the flavor of primal terror. A flicker of movement at the edge of her vision caught her attention. A shadow, darker than the darkness itself, detached itself from the wall and slithered towards her, its form fluid, ever-changing. It circled her once, twice, then coiled at her feet, a silent guardian, awaiting her command. Lena smiled, a slow, predatory stretching of her lips, and whispered a single word into the darkness. The word hung in the air, a sibilant promise, a threat whispered on the wind. Find them. John's frantic search for Maya led him deeper into the bowels of the Grand Hotel. He had stumbled upon a service corridor, its air thick with the smell of stale cleaning supplies and something else, something metallic and vaguely sweet, that sent a shiver down his spine. The emergency lights flickered sporadically, casting long, grotesque shadows that danced and writhed on the walls like living things. He could hear the frantic beating of his own heart, the rasp of his breath echoing in the confined space. The silence, once oppressive, now seemed to press in on him, suffocating him, amplifying every creak of the floorboards beneath his feet, every rustle of unseen things in the darkness. He felt a presence behind him, turned quickly, his heart leaping into his throat, but there was nothing there. Just the endless corridor stretching out before him, swallowed by the darkness. His mind, desperate for an explanation, conjured up images from childhood nightmares, monsters lurking in the shadows, waiting to drag him into the abyss. He pressed on, driven by a primal need to escape the suffocating silence, the crushing weight of his own fear. He had to get out, had to find Maya, had to find someone, anyone, who could explain what was happening, who could assure him that this was all just a bad dream, a figment of his overactive imagination. But deep down, a chilling certainty was taking root. This was no dream, and there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Maya found herself in a labyrinth of corridors, each one identical to the last, the air thick with the scent of dust and decay. She had been separated from John in the chaos, swept away by a tide of panicked bodies, and now she was utterly alone, lost in the heart of the Grand Hotel. The darkness pressed in on her, suffocating, disorienting. She stumbled blindly, her hands outstretched, her fingers brushing against cold, damp walls. She called out for John, for the Thompsons, for anyone, but her voice was met with only silence, an echoing void that seemed to mock her fear. She thought of her sketchbook, her lifeline to the world, lying abandoned somewhere in the darkness, and a sob escaped her lips. She felt so utterly alone, so utterly vulnerable, like a small animal caught in the glare of headlights, frozen by terror. Her phone, its battery nearly drained, offered a feeble beacon of light in the overwhelming darkness. She clutched it tightly, drawing comfort from its familiar weight, even as she knew it was only a matter of time before it too succumbed to the blackout. She had to find her way out, had to find John, had to find some semblance of order in the chaos that had engulfed them all. But, as the minutes ticked by and the darkness seemed to press in closer, she felt a chilling certainty that the Grand Hotel had become a prison, a place where hope went to die. As the vanishing hour deepened its grip on the Grand Hotel, a single elevator, seemingly unaffected by the citywide blackout, hummed to life. Its doors slid open, revealing a soft, golden light that seemed to push back the oppressive darkness, offering a momentary sanctuary from the terror that had gripped the hotel. Inside stood a figure, tall and imposing, his features obscured by the shadows, his presence radiating an aura of quiet power. He stepped out into the hallway, his footsteps soundless on the plush carpet, his gaze sweeping over the deserted corridor. He had been expecting this, had foreseen the events that would unfold on this night, had felt the subtle shifts in the fabric of reality that heralded the arrival of the darkness. He was drawn to this place, to the Grand Hotel, to the confluence of energies that swirled within its walls. He was a collector of sorts, a curator of lost souls, and tonight, the Grand Hotel was his gallery, its terrified occupants his unwitting exhibits. He moved with purpose, his long strides eating up the distance, his senses attuned to the subtle vibrations in the air, the whispers of fear and despair that clung to the very walls. He could sense their presence, the lost and the scattered, their fear a beacon in the darkness. He smiled, a slow, predatory stretching of his lips, and whispered a single word into the void. Soon. The silence in the Grand Hotel was no longer comforting. It had transformed into a suffocating presence. John leaned against a wall, trying to steady his breathing. He had circled the lobby, calling Maya's name. Doubt began to twist its icy fingers around his heart. Had he imagined seeing her? Was it a simple misunderstanding magnified by the darkness? The logical part of his mind argued it must be so. But deep down, a different truth took root. The people who had vanished were not simply lost. They were taken. He could feel it in the very air he breathed. He pushed himself away from the wall, his resolve hardening, and as he turned away, he caught a glimpse of something out of place. Lena stood before a hidden door, its existence concealed by layers of dust and shadow. It was a testament to the Grand Hotel's long history, a forgotten passage to a time when secrets were whispered in dimly lit corridors. She ran her fingers over the rough-hewn surface, feeling the faint tremor of unseen forces at play. With a slow, deliberate push, she opened the door, its hinges groaning in protest after decades of silence. Taking a deep breath, she stepped across the threshold, leaving the familiar terror of the darkened hotel behind. She smiled, knowing that the real game had just begun. John, drawn by an inexplicable pull, found himself standing before the grand staircase. It was the same spot where he had witnessed the shadowy figure vanish into thin air. The ornate rug was gone, revealing a section of polished marble that shimmered faintly. He knelt down, tracing the outline of a symbol etched into the stone. A complex design of interlocking circles and triangles writhed before his eyes. The hotel, for all its grandeur, had always been a backdrop to his ambitions. Now, in the eerie silence, the Grand Hotel revealed its secrets. He could feel the subtle hum of energy from the symbol. It was a feeling of immense age and power, waiting to re-emerge. The hidden passage wound its way deep beneath the Grand Hotel, a subterranean labyrinth of tunnels and chambers that spoke of a time when secrets were currency and power resided in the shadows. Lena, her footsteps echoing softly on the damp stone floor, moved with a familiarity that belied her years. She had walked these tunnels before, not in this lifetime perhaps, but in another, when the city above was a very different place, a place of shadows and whispers, of magic both wondrous and terrifying. The air grew heavy as she descended, thick with the weight of expectations and the anticipation of a reunion long overdue. She could feel their presence now, drawing closer with each passing moment, their energy a discordant symphony of power and hunger. They had been summoned, drawn to this place, to this time, by a confluence of events that had been set in motion centuries ago. She rounded a bend in the passage and came to a halt before a set of massive oak doors, their surface carved with intricate symbols that seemed to writhe and contort in the flickering light of the torch she carried. The air around the doors crackled with raw power, a tangible manifestation of the forces that lay beyond. Lena took a deep breath, savoring the moment, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. The time had come, the gathering dark awaited. The air beyond the oak doors was thick and still, heavy with the scent of incense and decay. Lena, torch held high, stepped into a vast chamber, its dimensions obscured by the flickering shadows. The air thrummed with a low, resonant hum, a vibration that seemed to emanate from the very stone itself. The chamber was not empty. Gathered in the center, bathed in an ethereal glow, stood a group of figures. They were as diverse as the guests who had vanished from the hotel above. A businessman in a rumpled suit, a young woman clutching a worn sketchbook, a family huddled together, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and awe. And yet, something about them was different. Their eyes, once filled with the light of life, now burned with an unsettling intensity, their gazes fixed on a point just beyond Lena's shoulder. She turned slowly, her heart pounding against her ribs, and found herself facing the figure from the elevator. He stood before an elaborate altar, his features still obscured by the shadows, his presence radiating an aura of quiet power. He acknowledged her with a curt nod, his gaze never leaving the chanting figures before him. The chanting reached a crescendo, the air vibrating with a power that seemed to suck the very breath from Lena's lungs. She stumbled back, bracing herself against the cold stone wall, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. She had witnessed many strange and unsettling things in her long lifetime, but this was something different. This was power on a scale she had only glimpsed in her darkest dreams. A power that threatened to unravel the very fabric of reality. The air beyond the oak doors was thick and still, heavy with the scent of incense and decay. Lena, torch held high, stepped into a vast chamber, its dimensions obscured by the flickering shadows. The air thrummed with a low, resonant hum, a vibration that seemed to emanate from the very stone itself. The chamber was not empty. Gathered in the center, bathed in an ethereal glow, stood a group of figures. They were as diverse as the guests who had vanished from the hotel above. A businessman in a rumpled suit, a young woman clutching a worn sketchbook, a family huddled together, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and awe. And yet, something about them was different. Their eyes, once filled with the light of life, now burned with an unsettling intensity, their gazes fixed on a point just beyond Lena's shoulder. She turned slowly, her heart pounding against her ribs, and found herself facing the figure from the elevator. He stood before an elaborate altar, his features still obscured by the shadows, his presence radiating an aura of quiet power. He acknowledged her with a curt nod, his gaze never leaving the chanting figures before him. The chanting reached a crescendo, the air vibrating with a power that seemed to suck the very breath from Lena's lungs. She stumbled back, bracing herself against the cold stone wall, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. She had witnessed many strange and unsettling things in her long lifetime, but this was something different. This was power on a scale she had only glimpsed in her darkest dreams, a power that threatened to unravel the very fabric of reality. John traced the intricate pattern of the symbol beneath his fingertips, feeling a strange pull, a sense of connection to something vast and ancient. The air around him seemed to crackle with energy, the silence of the blackout broken by a low, rhythmic hum that seemed to emanate from the very core of his being. He didn't understand what was happening, but he knew with a certainty that defied logic that he was meant to be here, in this moment, at the heart of the mystery. As his fingers followed the final curve of the symbol, the marble floor beneath him seemed to dissolve, the solid ground giving way to a swirling vortex of light and shadow. He cried out, his arms flailing wildly as he fell, a sense of weightlessness overtaking him. He closed his eyes, bracing himself for the impact, but instead of pain, he felt a strange sensation of movement, as if he were being drawn through a narrow passage, his body buffeted by unseen forces. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the swirling stopped. John opened his eyes, his vision blurry at first, his senses overwhelmed by the sudden shift from darkness to light. He found himself standing in the vast chamber, the chanting figures a tableau frozen in time, their eyes fixed on him with an unsettling intensity. And in the center of it all, silhouetted against the ethereal glow, stood Lena, her face a mask of triumph, her hand outstretched in welcome. The convergence was complete. Dawn, hesitant but inevitable, seeped into the city. The blackout receded with the slow, relentless advance of day. Streetlights flickered and died, leaving behind the pale luminescence of a city reborn. The Grand Hotel stood tall amidst the awakening cityscape. Inside, the lobby was deserted, the air now crisp and clean. Guests emerged, their faces pale, their movements hesitant. They spoke in hushed tones, their memories shrouded in haze. The city, however, offered no answers. It had awakened, resuming its routines with indifference. The vanishing hour had left its mark on the souls of those who had witnessed its impossible embrace. And that's the end of this incredible journey. Thank you for sticking with us through every twist, turn, and revelation. Your time and support mean the world to us. But the stories don't stop here. If you love thrilling, suspenseful, and captivating tales, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss the next gripping story. Got thoughts on this story? Drop a comment below, we'd love to hear what you think. Until next time, stay curious, stay intrigued, and we'll see you in the next one. Subscribe now and get ready for the next unforgettable story.